Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Getting In a College Coach Conversation. I am Ian Fisher, and I'm your host for this week. We're really excited. Well, not quite as excited as we were for the last episode where we got the opportunity to all gather together in person and do a show, but it is nice to be back home, and I'm sure that Beth and Sally feel the same. We're back to our regularly scheduled programming for today, and we want to start by talking a little bit about the transfer process. Now, it is the middle of February where we are recording this. It is going to be late February by the time it reaches your ears. But this is a time when we see a lot of students starting to think about that switch between colleges. And when we talk about the admission process, usually the focus is on high school students applying as freshmen, but there are a growing number of students who are also applying as transfers, whether that's from 2-year to 4-year institutions or between 4-year institutions. And so joining us to unpack some of the questions that transfer students might have, some of the thought process that they may be engaging in, is my colleague, Ryan Kelly. Hey, Ryan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ian.
It's nice to have you here. And your admissions experience was at the University of Colorado Boulder, among other places, right?
Yep.
And can you tell me a little bit about just the volume of transfer applications that you tended to see at Colorado? My sense would be that it would be pretty large as a public flagship institution.
You would be correct. So I worked closely with transfer students at a variety of institutions, including CU, where, yes, as a flagship public institution, we received a lot of students from a lot of different backgrounds, 4-year and 2 years. But I also worked closely with transfer students at private institutions, specifically at Fordham University, where yes, we had a large transfer population, relatively speaking, but it was much, much smaller compared to CU. But they still had the same goals, different locations, but the students were looking to change where they were to something different and what they oftentimes believed to be something better.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that the goals and your sense of that perception, right? So the desire of change on the part of a student because they perceive another opportunity to be better for them in some way. And I wonder if you have any advice for students who are in their first year of college right now, and they may be struggling in some respect. How can you identify what is just the normal transition period to college, making friends, being away from home for the first time, being responsible for yourself, being independent, versus a real urge or a need to have to switch institutions? How can students start to unpack those feelings and figure out which direction to move forward?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said figuring out, is this just a normal transition or is there something bigger happening? Is there a personal issue that is directly related to the institution that I'm currently at? It's not the fit that I thought it was. Or is there, and I have not struggled necessarily academically, but in my time at my school, I have determined that the program or major that I'm in is not what I want. And what I do want is not available at my current school. So continuing here would not allow me to pursue my academic goals. And then just having a real self-reflective moment of saying, what is actually happening now? Is this just, I'm a little homesick? My friends from high school seem to be happier than I am at their institutions for whatever reason. Or is it something much more concrete that this actually is not a good fit for me academically, personally, financially? And having that honest conversation with yourself as well as with others, family, friends, faculty at the institution, to say what is happening and have I actually given it the old college try where I'm currently at? Have I maximized the resources available to me to help me in this transition, fully maximize my time here?
Yeah.
Oftentimes students have a rough transition for whatever reason, and they just see it as easier to cut bait and move on. And oftentimes that results in just repeating the same situation next year someplace else.
Right. And in that next year, there's a greater sense of urgency because now you have fewer years in which to make that transition and figure out the new institution that you belong to. And I think some of these feelings of difficulty are exacerbated in many ways by social media, the way that students talk about their experiences. It's funny because I think a lot of kids figure I'm less happy than my friends are where they're going.
Yep.
But I think students are not ever outwardly complaining about the institutions they attend, right? They don't want to suggest that they made a mistake or that they're having some difficulty. And so it's like, everything's great for me here. But in reality, it's not so great. That is normal. And I just want to make sure that people that are listening here, the transition to college is challenging for everyone. It really isn't like you hit the ground running and you're just like, oh, this is wonderful. It's easy. I'm making all these friends. I don't have any social challenges. My roommate is the best person and showers every day. Like, that just doesn't happen for the overwhelming majority of people. And so you've got to figure, what is just that transition period and what is something that I need to take action on? And because we are talking about transfers, Ryan, I wonder if there are things that we can think of as specific items that might typically inspire a transfer decision. Like, a student says they don't have this, or they are not supporting me in this way. Or how would you guide students to identify, yeah, this is maybe a situation where you want to make the switch versus, hang in there, it's going to get better.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I ask that question of a lot of students that I work with, which is, tell me more. What thoughts have you put into this process? As I said earlier, a lot of times people or students will say, this school is just not for me for whatever reason. And they're looking for any port in the storm. And they will apply to the school that they've heard of, or their friend is having a great time, to your point, on social media. And I'll just go there and that will be better. But I really strongly encourage them to say, what am I missing now? And what do I need to fill in that hole in my academic or personal expectations? And where can I locate that? And that the transfer process, when it's successful, can be great. You can, I don't want to say fix problems, but you can get a better institution for you if you're looking at it correctly, if you are asking the right questions that are relevant to you and your own very specific situation. There might be 10,000 kids looking to transfer to a school, and they probably have 10,000 very different experiences and why they want to transfer. So it does become very specific to the student and how another institution can or can't help you on that particular journey. So asking yourself, okay, I'm an English major now at a small liberal arts school, but I really want to go be an electrical engineer. Well, you're probably going to be going to a larger institution. How does that fit with your not only academic goals, but how is that going to alter you personally? You went from 10-person rooms with professors to 300-person lecture halls and tens of thousands of students on campus. And, how does that impact you positively or negatively throughout the next 3-4 years of your life? So figuring out what is not working and why. Have I really done everything I can where I'm currently at to make it work? And if the answer is honestly yes, okay, what do I now need and where are these schools that can offer it for me? Because there are so many things that students will say, well, I just need another major and my school doesn't offer that. So if I go to this school, things will be better. They're not realizing that transferring can lose credits. Transferring can be more expensive, depending on the school. Transferring, I might be going into a school in January and there aren't a lot of other transfer students and everybody else already has a well-established group of friends and relationships. And I've got a new major, but also have a whole new source of issues to deal with. So there's a lot of things to unpack. And the good news is we have some resources available to students that can help with that process. Things to think about, questions to ask yourself, and how to move forward with that plan.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk a little bit about some of those resources and just things that we would recommend for students to think about going forward. I do think the important piece that I heard there was, how much have you put into the place where you are? How much have you invested and really worked at it? And I think that when you are applying as a transfer student, you need to make a case for your reasons for the transition. And if your transfer is, I've always wanted to go to a more prestigious school, or I really want to have a place that has certain clubs and organizations, and lo and behold, the place where you are currently has those same clubs and organizations, but you've never participated. I think it's harder for a school to say, yeah, we'll take you as a transfer. We're really excited about you, because there's not a confidence that you're going to jump in with both feet and take advantage of those opportunities. To your point, what is different about this new circumstance versus the old circumstance? And so there is quite a bit of reflection that is required here to think about not just why am I unhappy here, but what do I need to do in the future to ensure that I can have the best experience possible? And of course, there are things like cost and major that are black and white. It's like, this place is less expensive than this place. Okay, that's pretty clear. This place offers a major that this other place doesn't. That's pretty clear. But I think if it's experiential and it has to do with your behavior or attitude with respect to your school, that's an important thing to reflect on.
And I agree with all of that. And in addition to that, occasionally, I think maybe my perspective right there was very 4-year to 4-year transition. I'm going from this 4-year institution to that 4-year institution. Whereas there's many other populations that are looking to transfer, specifically students at a 2-year institution who have completed those 2 years, and moving on to a 4-year institution is the most logical next step. There's still things to think about that we still covered, but they're not looking to get out of a bad situation. They're looking to continue the situation as was their plan. Including them, I still recommend that they start thinking about that next step to that 4-year institution sooner rather than later, to make sure that they're following any articulation agreements, or they have any kind of necessary courses, or they're not going to lose credits. So regardless of where you're coming from and where you're going and why, good, bad, or indifferent, the sooner you can think about the process of transitioning to another institution, the more likely you are to set yourself up for success.
And that's an odd kind of paradox, I think, because for 2-year students, it makes a ton of sense. It's like, you're going to talk about these gen eds, you're going to really be focused on what your major is, you're going to ensure that all of your credits transfer so that you only have to do 2 years at the 4-year. For incoming freshmen, hopefully they're not thinking about transferring from the beginning. They're not planning to transfer. And so there is quite a bit of work that they have to do once they've made that decision to at least investigate the transfer market. What kind of recommendations? I want to talk a little bit about just thinking about grades and or not grade courses and how they transfer and so forth. But I'm curious about students who are surprised at the fact that they don't like a particular institution as a 4-year and they are now looking for something different. How do you recommend that they go through the research process, and what do they need to do on their home campus in order to put themselves in the best position to have a successful transfer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I know we say this a lot, but it depends on the program that you're looking, or school you're looking to switch to or transfer to. You could switch. So when I was at CU, if you wanted to switch to English or history, or transfer from another school to CU's English or history programs, relatively straightforward. There was nothing specific you needed to do in regards to academic courses. We were looking to see what courses you took, what grades you earned. But if you wanted to switch to the business program, or you wanted to transfer to engineering, not only were there grades and minimum GPAs and things that needed to be met, but there were specific courses that you needed to have as well. So you could be a 4.0 student with great classes, but if you were missing calculus or physics, there was extremely unlikely you were going to be admitted to an engineering program. So I think looking down the road to say, okay, I'm not happy where I'm at now, but I really want to study XYZ at school XYZ. Going to their transfer admissions websites and saying, are there prerequisites that I should really be thinking about taking next semester or the next 2 semesters, so that I can put those on my schedule today and be working towards not only doing well in those courses, but having those requirements to be a more competitive applicant for the schools that I'm going to be looking to transfer to. The gray area is some schools don't have any of those. Some schools have it for some majors, not for others. And sometimes those things conflict with another institution. School X might require, calculus, another school might require physics, or whatever it happens to be. So that's why I do encourage more research up front, figuring out what you want and what you need to do between now and then to apply. You should be thinking, I'm applying in a year, not I'm going to apply tomorrow.
Great.
That is not the approach you should have.
That's the question I was wondering, because these students that go to 2-year institutions are doing 2 years. They're committed in many cases to that minimum of a certain number of credit hours before they're transfer eligible. And I think a lot of students who are in their first year right now, they're thinking, I got to transfer, but it's hard to do that with only 1 year under your belt. There's not a lot of proof that you can show that you can handle college level work because you've only got 1 semester behind you. How would you encourage those first year students to think about their return in the fall? I can imagine a lot of students I don't want to go back to that place. My plan is to transfer. Like, this isn't really working for me. How does a student think about that plan, given that it might be necessary for them to satisfy certain requirements in order to be transfer eligible?
I would say work towards doing what you have to do to be successfully a transfer student, but make sure you're doing everything in your power to maintain where you are and that you're going to be graduating on track to graduate on time. You could do everything that's needed to do to transfer to another institution and they can still say no, at which point, what do you do then? You have to, well, I'm assuming, potentially go back to the school you're currently at, and you don't want to be behind schedule. That just is not going to make what is presumably a pretty rough situation that much more difficult.
That's right. That's right. And I think we always kind of have the view that applying for a new institution is always better when you're supported by a present day institution. That's true in high school. It's better to apply during your senior year rather than applying in the middle of a gap year, because you have the support of your teachers and your counseling office. And applying as a transfer, you want the support of your home institution, who, by the way, are able to do this. They're not going to say, oh, we don't like you anymore. We're not going to help you now that you've crossed us off your list. That's part of what they're there for, is helping you to get the education that you need. So make use of those resources and be thoughtful about your plan, as Ryan's recommending here. Any final words of wisdom or particular things that we didn't cover that you want to point students to in terms of a resource?
Be deliberate. I'm being a little bit repetitive here, but it really is doing the research up front makes you a better prepared student to transfer, or helps you realize that where you are currently is, I don't know if salvageable is the right word, but not as bad as you thought. Maybe it's just, you know what, this was a rough transition, but I have found different clubs and organizations. I have a community. I am now feeling better about my academic journey. So the idea of transferring as kind of a lifeline is no longer needed, because I've done the research and affirmed the other institutions as well as taken advantage of what's available to me at my home campus. So the sooner you can do that and get a more informed decision on what your life would look like if you stayed and what it would look like if you left, the better prepared you'll be regardless of that outcome.
Perfect. Do your homework, make a plan, follow through. I love it, Ryan.
it.
Yeah. Thanks for being here for this segment on the show, folks. If you have any questions about transferring, you can always send those in to us at gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. When we come back, we'll be answering some of your listener questions, so don't go away.